In our final lesson of the Supporting Details module, we're going to take our application a bit further by learning how to use details to help us make connections within a given text. So let's begin by discussing the cause and effect relationship. Now, as you recall, when we use a cause and effect relationship, what we are doing is explaining how events or ideas are connected to one another. Typically, a writer is going to use signal words to help clue us into the cause or the effect of something happening. So a cause is the reason why something happens. And the effect is what happens because of the cause. So this relationship works out to be a cause leads to an effect. Or it could be written as an effect is the result of a specific cause. So a cause will lead to an effect, or the author may present it as providing the effect and giving us details about what cause or causes led to that effect. Signal words to clue us in on causes potentially could be because, since, when, as a result of, the effect of, due to. Signal words to clue us into an effect could be so, therefore, thus, consequently, for this reason, the cause of, led to, or result in. So you want to pay attention to those signal words to help you identify that the author is presenting a cause and effect relationship. Let's take a look at a couple of examples to help us solidify what that cause and effect relationship looks like. We have the statement that alligators almost became extinct because people overhunted them. Okay, so we have our signal word because. So what happened? Well, we are told that the effect is that alligators almost became extinct. So this was the result. Why? Well, the reason why alligators almost became extinct is because people overhunted them. Okay, so our cause is that people overhunted alligators. The effect is that they almost became extinct. In our next example, there hasn't been much rain, so the harvest will be small this year. In this case, we have the cause being presented first, followed by the effect. So the cause is there has been little rainfall. Our signal word is so, which tells us the effect is following. The effect is the harvest will be small. So, little rainfall is the cause. So what's the outcome? What is the result? Well, the result is that they're going to have a small harvest. Let's take a look at a brief passage and see if we can identify the details that describe the cause and the effect. In this example, we are given two causes and are asked to match them with their appropriate effect. Let's take a look at a passage and then see if we can identify those cause and effect relationships. Have you ever wondered how bees make honey? First, a bee collects watery nectar from flowers. Then the bee stores it in a special honey stomach or sac. When the sac fills up, the bee returns to the hive. The bees then pass the nectar from bee to bee using their mouths. Passing the nectar causes the water to drop out. This slowly changes the nectar into honey. So our first cause is nectar fills the honey sac. In the passage, we are told when the sac fills up, the bee returns to the hive. So our cause is the sac filling up. Well, what is the effect? The bee returns to the hive. So if we look at our two effects that are given, the nectar turns into honey, the bee goes back to the hive, we know that when nectar fills the honey sac, the bee goes back to the hive. So that is our first effect. Now, the next cause, bees pass the nectar. So we're told the bees then pass the nectar from bee to bee using their mouths, and then passing the nectar causes the water to drop out. This slowly changes the nectar into honey. All right, so what is the cause? According to the passage, passing the nectar from bee to bee is our cause. The effect is it slowly changes the nectar to honey. So obviously, through process of elimination, we already know that bees pass the nectar turns into honey, is the cause-effect relationship. But, again, we need to practice identifying those details in the passage. Therefore, our effect of the nectar turning to honey is because the bees pass the nectar. The next relationship at which we're going to look is what is called the problem-solution relationship. So we need to learn how to identify details that describe the problem and give solutions so that we can better understand how those connections are made. So we understand that writers will sometimes organize a text in order to focus on problems and solutions. So as you read, you need to look for those specific details that identify what the problems and the solutions are. By doing this, it will not only help you better understand the topic, but also provide clues into the writer's opinion. Just as with the cause and effect relationship, you need to be able to identify the signal words that clue us in that the author is using a problem-solution relationship. So the signal words to look for would include question, answer, stop, fix, solve, should, must, make sure. Okay? You want to pay attention to those words. If you see those, the author may be using this problem-solution relationship. Let's take a look at the given example. People should pile sandbags around the pond to make sure it doesn't overflow. Okay, so in this case, the author is presenting us with the solution first, followed by the problem. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem listed here is that the pond could overflow. How do we address that problem? By piling sandbags around the pond. So this would be our solution. So with the problem-solution relationship, we are presented with a problem, and the solutions are ideas of things that could be done to address that problem and ultimately correct it. Let's briefly look at a passage that presents a problem-solution relationship and see if we can identify the problems and solutions that are presented. Then we're going to match the problem with the appropriate solution. Let's take a look at the text. Asian wild horses are the only truly wild horses in the world. In the 1960s, however, they became extinct in the wild. To save them, zoos had to raise the horses. After many years, some were let back into the wild in Mongolia. Scientists then faced a new challenge. They wanted to study the horses, but the horses were hard to track because they roamed so widely. The answer was to put GPS collars on the horses. The collars provided information about where the horses traveled and their habitat. So let's see if we can identify the two problems that are given in the passage. First, our problem is that Asian wild horses disappeared from the wild. So in our passage, the second sentence states, in the 1960s, they became extinct in the wild. So here we see our problem. So we're going to say that's problem number one. The second problem we're presented with is Asian wild horses moved too much to study. All right, so we're told that the scientists faced the challenge because they wanted to study the horses, but the horses were hard to track because they roamed so widely. So here is our second problem. So problem one, they became extinct in the wild. Problem two is they were hard to track because they roamed so widely. Now, what was the solution to problem one? Well, we see that right here in the next sentence. To save them, zoos had to raise the horses. After many years, some were let back into the wild in Mongolia. All right, so what was the solution to problem one? Zoos had to raise the horses. What about the solution to problem two? They were hard to track. The answer was to put GPS collars on the horses. So this is solution number two. All right, now that we have our information, let's match the problem with the appropriate solution. So Asian wild horses disappeared from the wild. Our solution was to raise them in zoos. Next, Asian wild horses moved too much to study, so our solution was to put special collars on the Asian wild horses. The third type of connection that we will examine is what is known as compare and contrast. Now, an author will use compare and contrast to examine different ideas, events, people, or things. So they'll make comparisons between the two to determine how they are alike. So when they make a comparison, they're looking at how two things are alike. And they may use signal words such as in the same way, both, or similarly. Now, when they make a contrast, what they are doing is examining how two things are different. So comparison looks for similarities, contrast looks for differences. When authors contrast, they're going to use signal words such as unlike, on the other hand, or however. Let's take a moment and look at a brief passage and see if we can identify details that are comparing similar things and contrasting how things are different. The words soldier and warrior are considered synonyms, but they have somewhat different meanings. Soldier usually describes someone who is paid to be part of an army. A soldier fights against another army in a war. A warrior also fights in a battle or war. However, a warrior is usually not part of an army. The word warrior can be used to describe anyone who fights and has courage. So let's make a couple of lists and see if we can identify details that describe our two terms that we are given, soldier and warrior. So we have soldier and we have warrior. So what are we told about soldiers? All right, so a soldier is someone who is paid to be part of an army. A soldier fights against another army in a war, so we know that they fight against another army in a war. So they fight in a war. The warrior, on the other hand, fights in a battle or war, so they also fight in a war. But the warrior is usually not part of an army. Based on this information, let's see if we can determine which details describe a warrior and which ones describe a soldier. So our first detail is fights in a war. Well, we see that that is true of a soldier as well as true of a warrior. So fighting in a war would be a comparison. How are they similar? Which one is usually not part of an army? Okay, so there's our clue right there, not part of an army. Well, the soldier is part of an army, so we know that that one is incorrect, but that does describe the warrior. A warrior is not part of an army. So in this case, we are looking at a difference between the two. This is a contrast. So both warriors and soldiers are alike in that they fight in wars. However, they are different in that a warrior is not part of an army, but a soldier is usually part of an army. In our last example, we learned how to identify those comparison and contrast relationships that are presented by the author within a single text. As a reader, there may be times that we will study a topic and we may need to compare and contrast what two different authors say about that topic. So let's take a look at an example to see how that would work. In text 1, we are told that it is usually over 80 degrees in the summer. You can go swimming during the summer, and you can wear your favorite t-shirt. Now, these are details that an author would possibly use to provide evidence and reasons for what he or she likes about the summer. Let's take a look at text number 2. It's usually over 80 degrees in the summer. In the summer, bugs will bother you when you're outside. It's too hot to run around outside. Now, in this case, these details could be used by an author to provide evidence and support for why he or she does not like the summer. So as you see, the authors are writing on the same topic. They're writing about the summer, but they have different viewpoints and opinions, and both will use evidence to support their particular viewpoints and opinions. As the reader, it is our responsibility to make the connections between the texts. So how are their views similar and how are their views different? Well, as you can see, in the first text, there is one point that they both make. It's usually over 80 degrees in the summer. Okay, so here we see that they are in agreement about the point. They are both agreeing about a particular fact, but one author is using this as a reason why he or she likes summer. The other author is using it as a reason why he or she doesn't like summer. Where do their points differ? Well, we see that here. So you can go swimming, you can wear your favorite t-shirt. Okay, that's what author 1 points out. Author 2 states, bugs will bother you, it's too hot to run around. So here we're making a contrast. We're looking at their reasons that are different. Before we close out this lesson, let's take a look at one more example to apply what we have learned about comparing and contrasting details from two different texts. In this example, we are provided with details that deal with Henry Brown, and we are told to identify the details that appear in the given text. Now, there may be one or two details that are not in the given text. They are in another text. So let's see if we can identify which details are in the text we are given. In 1849, Henry Brown escaped from slavery in a highly original way. He arranged to have himself mailed from Virginia to Pennsylvania. He had to spend over 24 hours in a large wooden box marked dry goods. People thought the box carried grain or some other type of dry material. They never guessed that there was a person inside. Brown's box bumped along to Pennsylvania by wagon, boat, and train. It was a very uncomfortable and dangerous journey, but he made it. Because of the way he escaped, he became known as Henry Box Brown. Let's look at the details that we have learned about Henry Brown and pick out the ones that are presented in this text. So Henry Brown's journey to freedom was difficult and full of risks. Well, let's look at some of the details from the passage. All right, so we're told that Brown's box bumped along to Pennsylvania by wagon, boat, and train. It was very uncomfortable and dangerous, but he made it. Not only that, he was inside this box the whole time. He had to spend over 24 hours in a large wooden box marked dry goods. Okay, so that tells us that it was difficult, and of course the fact that it was uncomfortable made it difficult. And we're also told specifically that it was a dangerous journey, so it was full of risks. So this particular detail is presented in the passage. The next detail, Henry Brown produced a moving panorama about slavery in America. We do not see that information anywhere in this text. So this particular detail comes from another text. And then finally, to escape slavery, Henry Brown mailed himself to Pennsylvania in a box. Well, we already marked that right here. That's what he did. He mailed himself in a box. Mailed from Virginia to Pennsylvania. So that detail is included in this text.